Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you and explaining to you MMD physics. I'll be showing you what they are, what they do, different methods of creating them, etc. I want to note that physics are not my area of expertise. I only know the basics about it due to creating models and all that stuff. If you're looking for short tutorials or a tutorial for a specific thing, check my channel, it might be there, but this tutorial is going to cover everything I know about physics, so it's going to be long. But for short tutorials, check my channel. If it's not there, you can just comment below or comment in one of the videos or note me in private and suggest a video, and if I know how to do it, then I'll do it. Well then, let's start with the tutorial. So what are physics and what do they do? I do not know the exact definition of physics in regards to modeling and animation, but all you have to know in regards to MMD is that physics are what makes certain objects move on their own automatically without you having to manually move them. Things such as hair, such as skirts, dresses, clothing pieces. You can even make bouncy balls and a lot of other stuff with physics, and it will just move automatically without you having to move them. Here I have a model, and if I go to physical operations, I have the physics turned off, and if I turn them on, you can see that the skirt fell in place, and you can see that the hair is moving on its own. If I move the model's head, you can see that the hair is moving. It's a bit glitchy, please forget that. I haven't fixed it or anything, but you can see that it moves. And if I go to physics operation and I start messing with gravity, and I do like if there was wind, you can see that the hair and the dress is reacting to the wind, and it's moving on its own. And pretty much that's what they are, and that's what they do. They automatically move this so that when you place a motion on the model, you make them dance, you make them do something, they react like if they were real. The hair reacts like if it was real hair, and it moves on its own. It reacts to gravity, it reacts to wind, same with the clothing, and same with everything else. Let's start explaining the physics section in PMX editor so you can see a little bit more about physics. There are two types of physics. There is what you can see here as follow-up, but I call it static, or it has different terms. I usually just call it static, and it's pretty much that it doesn't move. It's there, but it doesn't move. The purpose of this is that the physics that move interact with those physics, and those physics prevent the others from passing through. So usually these static or follow-up physics are usually placed in the body so that the hair physics or the dress physics don't go through the body. Then we have the physics itself, which are usually placed in skirts, accessories, or hair, and it's for moving and all that stuff, so it reacts to gravity, wind, and all that stuff. Here there's a third option, but I don't know exactly what it does, so I'm gonna leave that there. There are probably tutorials for it, but I'm not gonna cover this specific thing in the tutorial, nor the related bones, since most of the time you're just gonna use the default type and these two that are here. In the shape section, this determines the shape of your physics. So for example, this one is a capsule, this one is a box, and this one over here is a sphere. This doesn't affect your physics. What it does is that you can put the physics so that it fits with the shape of your mesh. So for example, the capsules are good for like the arms, and then the sphere is good for the head. But for the skirt, the boxes are better. So depending on your type of mesh, if it's like here, this is like paper thin, so like, and it's like a square, like a long square rectangle, so it uses boxes instead of spheres because the boxes adjust better to the mesh than using a sphere or using a capsule. Then we have the groups and the non-collision groups. The groups are to separate your physics. So for example, here the skirt is group 10. If I click here, you can see that it's from 1 to 16. You have here the skirt is 10, but then if we go to this lace thing, it's 15. And this pretty much separates it to be two different like groups. There's the skirt group and then there's the lace group, and then these accessories also have another group which is 9, and it's so that you can divide everything. Usually static and follow-up physics, which are the ones that stay still, are usually between 1 and 3. That's like the default one use. You can use any you want, but usually it's the most commonly used is 1, 2, and 3. I highly recommend to just place them all as 1. It's gonna make your life a lot easier. And then for anything that moves, usually people use between 4 and 16. I usually try to use from 7 to 16, just in case some people use 4 and 5 as follow-up physics, because it has happened before and it's usually on stages and stuff like that, and it messes up everything. So like, it's just better to use from 7 to 16 in my case, but you can use whatever you want. And the non-collision groups are what tells your physics if it's gonna interact with the object or if it's just gonna pass through the object. And what I mean by interacting is that, for example, if this model were to sit on the floor and there was a static physics on the floor, like let's say a box, the skirt is just gonna like react to it like if it was a floor. It's not gonna go through it. And that's pretty much what this does. It tells the physics like, hey, you can go through this, but you can't go through this. You have to stop. So that's what it does. And how you do it is, for example, as you can see, the boxes only have 10, the number 10 checked marked. This means that anything that is in the group 10 and it's marked, it will go through it. So you should usually have it marked, like if you select a group, let's say if I change all the skirt physics I have them selected, and let's say that I change them to 13. Now it's only gonna react to anything that is placed in 10, and it's gonna go through anything that is placed in 10, but it's not gonna go through anything that is marked as 13. So I have to check mark it, and now that it's check marked, it will go through anything that's 13. If I disable it, let me save this real quick. Here I have the model loaded on MMD. And this one is the one I originally had, which has the non-collision groups set to 10. So it's gonna react, it's gonna pass through anything that says 10. And in this one is the one that will change it to 13, and it's marked so that it goes through anything that's 10, but the 13 isn't marked. And if I turn physics on, this is how it reacts. And if we go back to the physical operations and we press display bodies, this will display the physics so you can see them in MMD. And as you can see, these ones are wiggling everywhere and trying they're just moving randomly. And the reason for this is because right now they're being told you can't be near this physics, and when you create physics for pretty much anything, especially skirt physics, usually the physics will go between each other so that if your model lifts their leg, it doesn't break apart and it goes through your leg. So usually they are between each other. So right now they're trying to fight and like separate from each other, so it starts giving that error. And over here they're being told, hey, this guy's your buddy, they think just hang out with him. And like as you can see, it's not trying to separate, and it's just smoothly going down. And it looks, and when I turn this off, it's looking like a skirt, while this is just looking like a complete mess. And as you can see here, this is reacting to these physics because they're in a different group as well. So like now if I turn this off, let's remove this, and let's stay with that one. If I lift one of the legs have the zero static physics. And if I lift the leg, let's move it forward, as you can see, these are the static ones, the green ones, and the red ones are our physics. And if I lift it, as you can see, it's reacting to it and bending along the other physics. And if I turn this off, as you can see, it's reacting like a skirt would. You lift your leg and it will lift with the skirt, will lift with the leg. It will not go through it. If I were to turn the 10 off and I will turn the 1 on, it will react like the other skirt that I deleted, and it will pass through the body. If I turn the 10 on and I check mark also the number 1, this will just go through the leg and it will react and it will look like this, but when I move the legs, it will just go through the leg. It will not register the leg as like, oh, I can't move here. So that's everything for group and non-collision groups. Now to size and position. The size and position is just the size of your physics and where it's placed. You do not have to mess around with the location and rotation. This is just telling you where in the coordinate axis your physics is placed. You don't have to mess around with it unless you know where everything in the coordinate axis is placed, and you can just type in the numbers here and you don't have to manually move them. But if you don't know about that, just don't mess with that. The radius and the height is what determines the size of the physics. However, the box has a third option, which is depth, and then the sphere has another option, has only one option, which is radius, while the capsule has radius and height. And then the most important part of physics, besides non-collision groups and groups, is the physics parameters. This is very important. Repulsion and friction usually just have it both at 0. What they do, I have it written down here, repulsion and friction, interaction with collision groups. It determines like the interaction with this, but usually it's set to 0. You don't have to touch that unless you're a pro at physics and you want to like make realistic physics, and so like you start messing around with that. But the most important ones are mass, move, and rotation. The mass determines weight, how heavy the physics are. The higher the number, the more heavier it is, while the lower the number, the lighter it is. Think about it as higher number means rock physics. If you take a rock and you drop it on the floor, that's the type of physics you're gonna get. But if the lower the number, imagine a feather. When you drop a feather, that's the type of weight you're gonna get. And so that's the mass. The move is speed. It determines the speed, and then the rotation is how everything rotates, how much it rotates, how fast it rotates, and stuff like that. So these are important and you can mess around with these, but usually I just leave it in the default ones, which is usually these ones 0.99, 0.99, these ones 0, 0, and then this is usually, if I'm not mistaken, it's usually 1. That's how I usually leave it as, or as 0.5. That's the default ones. It's also important to note that physics are connected to joints, and joints can also affect this. But I'm not gonna go too in depth in this because I am a noob at joints. My usual settings for physics is almost similar to this one right here. These would all be 0, and then in here it would be -10, and then this one 10, or they would all just be 0. That's my default ones. You can work with, you can experiment and try. There are even some tutorials. I will leave one in the description below, which is how to create a tutorial on how to create smooth physics. It's done by someone else, and they adjust the values here, and they also adjust these to create smooth physics, but you can combine them to create smoother physics or more realistic physics. And that's pretty much it for explaining and what it is, what they are. There's not much more into it, so let's go to the next thing. There are several ways of adding physics. The first method I recommend is selecting the bones and then going to Edit, Selected Bones, creating a basic rigid body / consolidated joint. Then all you have to do is just connect the first row joint to the physics it's supposed to follow, and boom, physics. The second method I recommend is using the skirt plugin. It's called skirt plugin as I believe its purpose was only for skirts, but it can be used pretty much for anything if you know how to use it. I won't go too in-depth here. You can find the tutorial for this method and the first method I mentioned in my channel, but this one is good for when you also have to add bones, especially when you don't have any bones and you need to add physics plus the bones. The third method is just painful, and it's adding them by hand. That means one by one, and not only adding the physics but also adding the joints by hand. I do not recommend this to anyone unless you have to do it on something very specific like a stage where you can use the two methods mentioned above, etc. So just stick with the first two methods if it's for clothing, hair, and all that stuff. The fourth method is also by hand, but it's a bit easier and a lot quicker than the third one I mentioned, and it's using the advanced window to quickly add the physics and joints one by one. Something I want to add is that using the advanced window doesn't make you a pro nor advanced at model editing. I have seen some users claim they are a pro because they use it, and this is not true at all. I might make a video later on what things make you advanced and what things are not advanced, but I just wanted to point that out. So these are the methods I am aware of for adding physics in PMX. And you can do several things with physics. First, if you go to physical operation, these right here will enable or disable physics. I will talk about this one in a minute, but first, if you select any time, it will pretty much enable physics at any time. This means that you don't necessarily have to be viewing your animation for it to just be displaying the physics. Then in trace mode, you'll notice that you'll be able to see the bones again, and it's not displaying the physics. If you click play and you're gonna view your animation, you can see that you have physics activated again. I have read that using trace mode instead of anytime is actually better because the computer pretty much renders faster or something. It works faster. So like if you have a low graphics PC, trace mode is better for you. If you have a good PC, then use anytime. Then if you select no calculation, this means that the physics won't be enabled. So even if you click play, you'll notice that there are no physics activated. Be careful with this. If you're gonna render, make sure that you have either trace mode or anytime selected, because if not, you're just gonna render this. You're just gonna render it with no physics, and that ain't pretty. Now, on and off mode is a little bit different. Let's select the ponytail in my case. If you go to here, after you select something that has physics, if you go to here to this little box that says physics, you click it to disable it and then you press register. And if you now go to physical operations and you select the on and off mode, you'll notice that these have the physics activated, but the large ponytail doesn't. And if I hit play, you notice that these pigtails have physics, but the large ponytail doesn't. This is really good if your character is sitting down and you're gonna make an animation like the hide motion. I believe it was called hide the song or something. And pretty much if you have that, you can just use this to pose the skirt, then use this, and your hair and accessories can have physics, but when you click the animation, the skirt would stay in place, posed, and everything. So it's really good for stuff like that. Then we have display bodies, which will display the physics of the model. Even if you click animation, you will be able to see them. You can also mess with all of this while the motion is running. So if I turn this off, you can see that it's off now, and I can turn it on again and I can see them again. There's this weird glitch, I don't know if it's on all of MMD or just my computer, that when I disable the physics, you can see that the display bodies pretty much just registers the last position of the physics instead of going back to where the model is. So I don't know if that's a glitch or what, or if it's just my MMD, but yeah. If you want to see display bodies, make sure you have it in T pose and then select it, or in A pose, or just use any time. Or apparently trace mode also works. There is also gravity. Good old gravity. Here you can mess with gravity and wind. You can create wind using the X axis. You can see it moves side by side. The C moves back and forward. And then the Y just goes down and up. So like falling and stuff like that. Before I go to acceleration, there's something important I want to mention, and it's if I move this model right here, you can see that there is something stopping the hair from going below the axis. This is this that says floor. There's pretty much an invisible floor throughout the whole world, you could call it. And if you disable that, you can see that the hair is going through the floor because the floor has been disabled. This is pretty much for that. This is really good for when you have mermaids and you don't want them to you don't want the tail to just like curl here and you want it to go straight down, then it's perfect for that instead of having to like move the mermaid up. Now with gravity and acceleration pretty much this is pretty much gravity. How much like gravity is being placed. Usually I leave it at like 0.5 since it gives it a more softer look, as you can see here. So usually when I do animations, I leave it at somewhere like 0.5, or in this case, I would go a little bit higher, like 0.9 or 1. And it pretty much depending on the model, I just mess with it, and in certain cases, it makes the physics look a bit smoother. Now, if we go to 0, it pretty much acts like there's 0G, 0 gravity. So like if I move this around a little, you can see that the hair is floating. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I forgot what noise did. But since it's at 0 G's right now, as you can see, it's acting like there's no gravity. The hair is floating and all that stuff. So this can be used if the character's underwater or if they're in a place where there's no gravity, or pretty much just because it looks cool in some models and in some motions. And that's pretty much it. And that's it for this tutorial. This is all I know about physics, more or less. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you want to get notified for more tutorials. Bye bye.